Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are based. Let me start my presentation and share my screen with you. You let me know when you can see stuff. Yeah, good.
Yep.
So thanks for the intro. No need to say anything more on this slide. Sharing my experiences with you, essentially. A little bit about me, as Imran said, to complement background in software development years and years ago. I've done XP, I've done Scrum, done TDD, all these nice goodies. Scrum Master, Agile coach for more than 10 years, more than 11 years now, I think. Large and complex organization transformations, such as banking and insurance, telco, and what have you. All levels really I've worked with, mostly teams and middle management, mid-senior management, because leadership is leadership and have limited time. I've trained teams and individuals around Scrum, basics of Agile, around OKRs, around product ownership, all these goodies. And I'm an ICF accredited coach as well, for what it's worth. And you can scan that and link up with me if you want to keep in touch. Now, why are we here today? To discuss what's worked and what hasn't worked with regard to OKRs. We've got 15 different areas. That's not a huge number. There's a good number to give you some sort of examples of what works and what doesn't and why it happens. I've got some examples of real life. I'm not going to go into detail of how OKRs work and are structured and what makes a good OKR, what makes good key result. We're going to touch upon that, but it's not today's meetup's purpose. Okay, just to manage expectations. Okay, and Slido time. I'll want you to scan this QR and or go to Slido 2.0 and use OKR. And I'm going to stop sharing this screen now and start running my Slido in the background. I have 3 questions for you. Let's start running it. First one is, and let me just continue screen share. Okay, it's my browser really. Check in. What's your energy today? 4 out of 5, happy faces. We're 4 participants. I'll wait a few seconds. Tuesday night's not too bad. It's not Wednesday yet. Wednesday, the energy levels start to decline. By Thursday, everyone's 1 or a 2. Okay, good. Attendance mode. Question number 1, familiarity with OKRs. Yes, no, or a little bit. I've heard about it. Friends are using it. Some teams are using it. Or completely oblivious to the subject. A good split, 2/3 familiar, and the rest somewhat and a little bit of no. Cool, thank you. And the last one for today. Why did you use OKR in your company? To set goals for your employees, to set goals for our teams. This might actually not show me any results, but might be a wrong type of question. Fine. We'll find out in due course. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So 100% to set goals for our teams. Some people say to set goals for a company. And these are the problematic areas. Set goals for employees individually and use it as personal PD goal and evaluation tool, which we try to stay away from. Cool. Thanks for that info. Let's see. Let's carry on with the presentation here I have for you today. Are we back in? Cool. Before we start, a very brief history of what's going on with the OKR. Thanks for the ones who I'm not aware of. Around 1999, Google started this goal-setting framework, if you like, with setting objectives and trying to measure it with the key results, essentially.
Achilles?
Yes.
Achilles. We're seeing your presenter view, so we're not seeing the full screen.
Sorry
view.
about that. Let me
Okay.
change views. There we go. Better?
That's great.
Awesome. Yeah, around 2010, the agility started picking up, right? Scrum and what have you, and trying to figure it out. And around 2017, I want to say, 2017 to 18, I started hearing from different companies, hey, do you know how to use OKRs? You know, this framework, how there are different KPIs, or we want to use both. And 2018, this book comes out, which is, for the record, I read it, I liked it. Some things are a little bit questionable. John Doerr, Measure What Matters. He describes, I think he's next Google employee when he describes what matters. Well, measuring what matters as based on his idea. I'll touch upon it a little bit later. And today, OKR is widely known and pretty much a de facto standard for setting goals in companies. Now, I think, as far as I'm concerned, two schools of OKRs. One is John Doerr's, that everything that matters is measurable, right? We can measure everything given, if you give it a little bit of thought, and everything can be cascaded, right? If we have one objective with the key results, we can take those key results and make them objectives for other teams down below. Okay, that's one approach. And I think the other part of it is the non-John Doerr approach, which is more pragmatic. If you've been in the agility game long enough, you'll see that one size doesn't fit all. So we need to be a little bit more pragmatic in what works and what doesn't work. And not everything will be measurable. We need to accept that as well. It'll make our lives easier. How I've structured this, there are two panes, one on the left, one on the right. What has worked, what hasn't worked. Okay, and why I believe the left-hand side is wrong, I believe the right-hand side is right, and why it could work. Okay, I also have some indicators on the bottom right, how frequently we see each pitfall, if you like, low, medium, high. And I also have some examples and some sort of really brief case studies. So for the unfamiliar ones with the OKRs, this is just an example. Our objective is to become I work for company X, and our objective is to become a leading brand by increasing our customer awareness for 2022. That's my objective, right? My company objective. And how I'm going to measure it, these are my key results. Number one, I'm going to increase our monthly subscription by 20%. I'm going to, say it's Netflix, for example. I'm going to increase our referrals by 50%. And I'm going to increase our revenue by 20% as a result of all that. If I do that, I know my objective is completed. Why this is a decent OKR? Because this is an aspirational objective, and because these things are measurable, right? There is a delta. Now, let's begin our lessons learned. First one is around the direction that our OKRs are being the direction that they follow, right? On one hand, we have a trickle-down OKR based on John Doerr's book, which means that I set goals on the highest company level. I set my objectives, I set my key results, and then I give those key results to other teams down below me, one level down, and I present to them and I say, these are your objectives for the next few months or a year. Then these guys take these key results, make them their objectives, come up with new key results, and then they give those new key results down to the teams below, -2 level, if you like. So this is the trickle down, as I said, OKRs, cascading OKRs, if you like. Why this is wrong? Because sometimes, well, most of the times, those key results can't be the object. I mean, it sounds good in theory, but in practice, that can't be adopted so well. I mean, the nice thing behind it is that you can aggregate many teams around doing one thing and meeting one objective. But the more you break it down, the less effective it becomes. The teams find it really, really difficult to set objectives, the key results of the above person, if you like. The better approach is what's called a top-down and bottom-up collaborative approach. So leadership and senior management set the objectives and come up with the key results to measure them. The teams or squads or whatever you call them, they come up with their own objectives, how they want to hit it, and then they meet some place in the middle to say that, okay, these are our leadership and company objectives. This is what we're going to do as a team to meet those company objectives. So there is some sort of linkage. And for that matter, they use Jira or some tool of preference to link them up. As an example, a company is producing OKR on a company-wide level. The teams link their OKRs with the company's objectives or OKRs. Okay, so it's a two-way street instead of one cascading. Number 2, leadership engagement. We see some companies, there's more often than not, no OKR on leadership level for some reason, because they have other means of measuring, other means of goal setting, maybe they don't know. Okay, and that itself presents a problem, because if you don't have OKR on that level, you don't empathize with how the OKR system works more often than not. You're not familiar with it. You're asking people to do it, but you don't do it yourself. You don't practice what you preach. And that doesn't, on the leadership level, that doesn't go down very well, right? At some point, it's going to break because teams are going to just give up and say, well, we're doing our part. No one's doing their part upstairs. A better approach to this is send your leadership and training, OKR training, at least familiarize them with the OKR framework, so that leadership has skin in the game. They understand what we do and why we do it, and drink their own champagne, if you like. And this is high frequency, if you like, mistake. Onto a real life example. A company did not have OKR on leadership level, and as a result, the teams didn't know where to link the OKRs to, as I mentioned. Right? What happened? Leadership ended up adopting OKRs, and they said, okay, from this quarter on, we're going to have OKRs on the leadership level. And they experimented with a few things, right? Initially, they had just objectives. Then they have just key results. Then asked the team to come up with their own key results and link them upstream. So it's a mix and match, learning from their own mistakes.
So Achilles, on that, did they create some OKRs at the leadership level that was putting all of the other OKRs that, like, to put the top of the pyramid, if you like, or did they have to do a whole reset on OKRs?
It's the first, what you mentioned. So we're talking about obviously a multi-layered company, right? So a divisional cluster or tribe, whatever you want to call it, they had their objectives, which is typically stable for a year, right? Maybe 2 years, depending on your strategy, right? Or how big that division is. So that division came up with their objectives that linked upstream as well to the company objectives. That's more like 5-year strategy or something like that, right? So they came up with that. Before that, it was just all about, oh yes, the teams need to do this, need to do that, and come up with OKRs and pseudo evaluation every quarter, and everyone was happy that the goals were hit and everything. But really, they didn't understand what they're doing it for. But eventually, that they came up to using themselves. Now, a few words about the mission, vision, strategy, and OKRs, and how the whole thing hangs together. In every company, you should have. It's highly suggested you have all these elements, right? and one helps the other realize its purpose. Right? Strategy is the way of using the mission to achieve the vision, essentially. Okay, and from strategy we can derive our objectives. Okay, the goals are simple statements of what needs to be accomplished to implement the strategy. And further down we have the actions, what we're going to do in order to hit the goals, right? In order to fulfill the strategy and the vision and all that. Now, if we're missing that, and I'll come to this in a second, there's no linkage. And I've seen this annoyingly many times. We have a mission that we want to be, our mission is to clean Earth's waste or something, a vision. We don't know how we're going to do this, but we're asking the teams and everyone in the company to come up with objectives and link them somewhere. For me, that's a little bit of waste. Which leads me to my next point. No strategy or vision at a company level, right? Or no OKR linked strategy. And this is mostly for the smaller companies, but I've seen it in some big telcos, for example, where strategy wasn't communicated, maybe remain upstairs to the C-level. And I think that doesn't work very well. Instead, what works, visible, comprehensive vision and strategy where OKRs can be linked to, because then we know why we do stuff. It's always asking the why, right? Why do we do stuff? Well, because we have some goals to fulfill. And that's medium frequency, I think. Yeah, it's not so often that you see companies not having the strategy, but how you communicate that strategy to everyone else so they're aware why they do stuff. How we see the OKRs as a holy grail. Right? This is the answer to everything. Now we're going to do, as it's 2023, we're going to do OKRs and everything's going to go well and everyone's going to be happy. Well, that obviously not the case, but you'll be surprised. People do believe that. They do believe that this new thing, same with Agile, right? So now we do Agile or fully Agile, as some companies say, and all the problems will be resolved. Instead, use the OKRs as a complementary tool to fulfill their goals, okay, and to help you set goals and understand how you're measuring the value added with your key results, with your deltas. Any questions so far? Okay, once, twice. You can type it in the chat if you guys want to.
I think the question is coming to my mind, not necessarily about this slide, but it's about our OKRs as valid for small companies, medium companies, massive companies. Is it completely useful for everyone equally, or is there a sweet spot?
I think, simple. Go with the simplest thing, right? OKR is a goal-setting mechanism, right? Do we need to set goals? That'll be my question. If yes, we can try that. If no, might as well not. That would be my short answer. So goal setting can be in an individual level, right? We can have individual OKRs. I can have my goals for life, for next month, or for next year. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't discard it.
Yeah, okay. And there was another question from Guy. What are particularly complementary processes working with OKRs?
Sorry, what's the question?
So feel free to chip in, Guy, but it's what are particularly complementary processes working with OKRs?
Not sure I can reword it if you need, but it's based on your thing on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need me to reword it?
Okay. Yeah, got it.
It's just I was typing very quickly because you said going, gone. So I really wanted to get it in there.
Sorry about that. Yeah, might be too quick on that. Complementary. So do whatever you would have done if you didn't have the OKRs, and then try to set your goals, implement this framework. That's what I mean. Use your Jiras, use your Scrums, your Kanbans, your meetings, your PMOs, anything you do, and also introduce this. Okay, don't just say, forget everything else, now we do OKRs from 23. So forget PMO, forget, right? That's what I mean.
Thank you, yes. I understood what you meant in general. I was just meaning, are there any of that list of about 6 or 8 things that synergize better with OKRs?
Not off the top of my head. I would think goal setting or objective setting goes everywhere. So I wouldn't think it works one location, the other location doesn't.
Okay. So, and Craig is saying look up X matrix. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll look it up.
And while I am here, do you have any other books that you would recommend? Since it sounds like you're not really happy with the John Doerr one, do you have a book that you do recommend, please?
I don't have books. I have sources. Felipe Castro is one of them. Jeff Gothelf is another one. These are my go-to people. Felipe Castro has done some brilliant work around it. Most of the things that you want to look up for OKRs should be there, and he's got some free, ebooks to download, PDFs rather, some 10 or 20 pages or something like that, an easy read. So use that. Jeff Gothelf, Jeff Gothelf, and yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. I shall carry on to the whys. Why have we decided to use OKRs? You'll hear people saying that because it's trendy and this new thing that we need to do, or we don't want to use it. They told us to use it, which is quite frequent actually. You'll see that in teams happening, that they see it as a tick box exercise that HR asked them to do in order for PD evaluation, all that. And again, this is a massive red flag for me. Employee evaluation, that doesn't work, and I'll illustrate that further down with an example. Instead, you set goals, as we said, objectives, and to keep track of the added value, right? Only if we have some decent, clear results can we understand what's the difference that we're making to the company, to our customer. Okay, are we moving the needle, right? So positive, negative, which works much better, and which actually we see quite frequent, especially these two, no reason and employee evaluation, more often than not. And you answered it yourselves. I think some people answered it for evaluation. Real life example. A company decided to use OKRs to evaluate its employees and determine their end of year bonus. Calamity. As a result, the employees did not set any aspirational goal that they weren't 100% sure that they would hit. Okay, this approach was scrapped a few months later as inefficient. Essentially what happened, and I actually coached one of the teams, it was about code coverage, and we said, let's be aspirational, make it 80%, which is quite aspirational for code coverage. And they said, well, Achilles, no, let's say 50%, 50 to 6%. I said, no, let's go for it. 70, 80%. I said, well, no, let's do 50%. I said, why, Mr. John? John. I said, well, it's our end of year bonus based on that, so I'd rather go for something that I can hit. So it's the so-called committed versus aspirational objectives. On to level of OKR engagement. Individual engagement versus teams engagement. Okay, and you'll see that sometimes we companies put people to individuals to set their own goals, and granted that can be done, but it's more likely to lead to binary goals that are easy to measure, but they don't help determine whether these individuals grown or improve in a meaningful way. Okay, or it's how many lines of code can I write in order to program Google search engine? Talking about teams, yeah. Unless the individual is solely responsible for a metric like sales, or he can move the needle on a business area so much, maybe that has its place then for individuality. But usually we're talking about team OKRs. Finally, we need to gauge the change in the behavior of the target audience. And as individuals in today's world, it's a little bit hard to move the needle into our target audience as a whole. Fortunately, haven't seen it happening too often, but it does happen. So low frequency on this. Training, OKR training. Some companies, well, high frequency. A lot of companies are trying to figure it out on their own. Okay, they've read a couple of sources and on to implementing it next quarter, and that leads to really, really mixed results. Usually on the bad end of things, right? For a number of reasons, mostly because it's easier to get it wrong than right. Okay, so the simplicity of the coming up with checklists and do's and don'ts, it's easier to do than come up with something that actually offers value. And we need to ask ourselves why we do this. What's the difference we're going to make? So all these questions typically lead into thinking more strategically. And sometimes teams don't want to do it. They don't want to go into that discussion of why do we exist? Why do we do things? Just do it. Okay, so that's not great. Figure it out on your own. Instead, I would highly, highly recommend sending all your teams to training. And in fact, I would say send the whole team to training, not just ambassadors. Because usually what happens is when you send ambassadors, they come back and they find resistance. Okay, they might preach the gospel. So if you send one person into training in a team of 8, they'll come back with ideas, what's right, what's wrong. But culture and all, right? So he's going to be swallowed by the culture of and inertia of the team not doing it in the right way. So eventually, I would recommend sending the whole team so they understand the language, the terminology, or what they're talking about. Review frequency, review cycle. Don't fire and forget, and don't do annual or never, right? We set goals 1st of Jan, right, or 6th of Jan or 7th when we'll go back to work, and that's it. No one cares about it. No one even knows where they are, somewhere in Confluence maybe, or in SharePoint, or we don't know. And we'll never review them. Okay, so it's a pointless exercise, and it's usually quite expensive exercise as well, because you gather around, you do this PI planning or big room planning, and you're forcing your teams to go through this arduous process of coming up with objectives and this and that, and then you forget about it. So actually, it's quite wasteful. Instead, if you decide to go with OKRs, do evaluate them frequently, right? We can talk about it frequency later on, and it's monthly or quarterly, I would say, in the team, right? So as a Scrum Master and as an Agile coach, I would suggest that the team revisits their objectives and the OKRs every month in a planning session or something. Spend a half an hour or 1 hour to see where are we, what did we say last month we're going to do, are we doing it, right? And then obviously quarterly you can do this to see your team dependencies, left, right, and center, and see whether you're aligned with the company's objectives, so if something changed. And in high frequency, see that the more companies try to figure it out on their own, the more they are susceptible to these pitfalls here. Frequency of change. New OKRs every 1 to 3 months. That happens, right? The teams are called to set objectives and how they're going to measure it every 3 months for some reason, because it's an exercise they go for, because they don't know any better. I'm not saying this is completely wrong, depending on the frequency of change in your company or the products you're pushing out, your services. but I would recommend that because it's a goal setting is more like high-level strategic tool. Maybe every 6 months or more is more appropriate to set your goals, unless you want to pivot. Unless you said we're going to do X, and then in 2 or 3 months we evaluated and we said, well, actually that's not good because we experimented, we tried this and that, and it doesn't work, so we scrap it and we do something else. But you will see that most companies that do opt in for the 1 to 3 months, eventually they go to the longer terms. They have some, again, big room planning or PI planning, or quarterly planning, and they say, well, our goals are the same as they were 3 months ago. So, and we keep on working them. So that takes to the 6 month sort of cadence.
Achilles, on that one, you might get to this anyway, but so we're talking about the aspirational goal of it, the objective. You shouldn't keep changing that. You should have that for a set time, at least 6 to 12 months, something like that. But the key results, would you be modifying those as you go along? Is that do you set 12 months worth of these are the key results we expect to get to in the next 12 months?
Yeah, potentially. So if we think about, so we're like January the 1st, or whatever, we say we want like 20% adoption. And then in April or May, we realize we do want adoption, but 20% is not going to happen. So maybe we'll go for something lower. Right? Or maybe we did some market research and we found out that no one does 20%. No one has achieved 20% adoption, right? So we can't do this. So maybe we want to go for something more realistic. So yes, I would reevaluate. I mean, evaluation is built into agility anyway, right? So no harm in doing this. But the objective is, yeah, if we keep on changing our target, maybe it's a moving target in the end, right? So any other question before I go into the real life example? Nope. Real life example. A company provided limited OKR training seats to its employees. None or only one person was trained per team. The team never managed to create good OKRs and instead created a list of to-do. They never reviewed them and they never believed in the system. It was just this management thing that we need to do. And again, culture, right, kicks in. I would argue even in a big team of 10 or 12 people, if you send 2 or 3 people as ambassadors to come back, that's not enough. They're still going to be people that don't understand the language, they don't understand why we do it, and they're likely to escape any sort of tryouts for doing objective setting. Okay, so I highly suggested that if you're going to do it, send the whole team, so that saves you the trouble and the money. Another one, out of the box usage. Expect to get it right first time. Why is this wrong? Because it's not going to be right first time. It's not going to be right the second time even. I think you're going to have multiple tries, multiple passes before you get it right, or before you get it to a stable level where you can say that actually this works for us. May not be 100% correct, but actually this works for us and we've got some results and we're happy with what we see. Okay.
Achilles.
Yes.
What do we mean by right?
Why we mean, okay, good question. First of all, it's the mechanics of it. Are our objectives good objectives to have, right? So we need to decide, is it going to be committed or aspirational, as we talked about a few moments ago. Committed, it's something that we need to commit to and deliver, right? It's not negotiable. Aspirational is something that we say, we shoot for the stars and we'll see what happens. Okay, maybe we will actually reach for the stars. We don't know, right? So that's the mechanics. Again, mechanics around key results. Are key results measurable? Do they have a timeline maybe, right? Do we have a baseline? Is the difference we're trying to measure, does it make sense? Are we talking about vanity metrics that we're going to see in a few moments? right? So these are the technical stuff. The other part of it is, does it make sense for our company? We use a goal setting mechanism. Are we actually hitting our goals? Does it mean anything? Or is it, what's the feedback we're getting from our teams? Right, we've done like 3 times now. Is anyone getting any benefit from it? I frequently ask the guys, I actually provoke them to say that, why do you guys do it in the end? What will happen if you stop doing it? Not just OKRs, for everything, right? Stop using Jira, stop using retrospective, stop, right? So asking some provocative questions to see how they're going to react to it.
Great, thanks. And what would you say is, for example, what I have seen in my company where I work as far as OKRs is concerned? People come up with a huge list of OKRs. Okay, next 6 months, next quarter, we are going to target this day node. Is there some sort of a good sweet spot as far as the number of OKRs is concerned, which the teams or the organization should be targeting? Or how does that work?
Mm-hmm. And also, now that you mention it, there's one more element, the dependencies with other teams, right? So that's going to be embedded into the objective. How dependent is our objective to other teams? Something that I didn't put it here, but it's worth mentioning it. A good number is 2, 3, or 4 key results. Anything beyond that, you start enriching it too much, making it way more specific. Right? You're narrowing down the scope of what can be done, I think. And maybe you're thinking too much. I've seen objectives with 1 key result. Why not? And then the more you enrich it, the more checklisty you're risking making it. I'll show you a couple of examples.
Yeah, I was actually talking in the terms of not the key results, but the objectives, number of objectives I was thinking about. Is it?
Right, okay. Well, can you have too many goals?
I don't know. I'm asking you that. You're the expert.
Well, I think usually a team has a purpose, right? And I wouldn't say too many goals. I think 2 or 3 objectives for a 6-month period are more than enough. I would even argue, if a team, for example, they have a purpose of, I don't know, building an API or something, providing it to other teams, right? That's the service. Maybe they have one objective, to have 0 complaints, for example, right?
Great, thanks. Thought so. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Doesn't that lead back to the first point about you're not going to get it right? So it's just
exactly
by trial and error, you'll get to the sweet spot.
Precisely. Do 10, right? See what happens. Yeah. Thanks, Grant. So instead of expecting it right first time, OKRs need constant practice of what doesn't in this world, and expect and embrace magnificent failures, right? And that's a call for the leadership, because that's a bit of a sensitive subject. If you tell any guy in leadership level, I'm actually expecting to make it wrong, to do it right, to do it wrong a few times, it's not going to go down very well, I don't think. But that's the truth, right? That's why training on the leadership level matters, so that they know what they're dealing with. And again, medium frequency, not so often. Some come more pragmatic views. Most companies, I want to believe, they have Agile coaches that preach that, embracing failure sort of mindset. Key results quality. What doesn't work? Checklists don't work because checklists are just lists of to-dos. They don't tell you whether you move the needle. They tell you if you've done things or if you haven't done things. They don't tell you if you brought any value, right, to the company. Instead, use some measurable indicators, right? For example, we have categories of KRs, value-based and activity-based, right? The activity-based is more on the left-hand side as a checklist, do or don't. And the value-based are more to the right. What value are they offering to the company? As I said in one of my first slides, pragmatic view, sometimes we are going to have activity-based. We are going to have checklists. Should we stay away from it? Maybe, maybe not. It's not bad to have, especially when you're adopting the OKR framework, have a few checklists there just for to make people feel good about hitting their goals, right? So once they've done that, once they get to the second level, start asking these questions. Okay, you've done it. What's the value that you're offering to the company, right? So you get them started thinking into different ways, apart from do or don't, right? So no checklists, rather measurable indicators. The quality of the objectives, again, shouldn't be an objective. Shouldn't be a checklist or objective, right? Do or don't. Shouldn't be a do this, do that. It should be an aspirational goal. And it shouldn't be a promise to our bosses, because that leads back to using OKRs as evaluation tool, and that just doesn't work, as we mentioned. Instead, objectives should be around a product or a service, should be ambitious, right? Because otherwise, again, it's just the committed that we need to do 100% of this. There's no ambition to it. You just do thing. And it can give you a reason to wake up in the morning to say that, actually working towards this and actually working to exceed that or make this even greater, right? Real life example. A company did not provide OKR training to its teams. As a result, the team's OKRs look like this. Okay, check this. Objective, evolution, whatever that means. That doesn't tell me anything. Doesn't tell anything to anyone who's going to visit the OKRs. KR 1, identify the priority capabilities and enables based on internal and external feedback and expectations. I don't know how that's going to affect my company at all. I don't even know how to measure that, right? Key result number 2, execute yearly plan with the aim of achieving the 23 roadmap and fulfilling the strategy as agreed, which is essentially say that do what we promise we're going to do. So a lot of things going on here. I don't understand what the evolution is about. Probably evolve our service or product, but really extremely vague. And that's just blabbering about doing things that was going to do this corporate talk. Okay, and actually that team had about 10 KRs of this sort of quality. So bad example. Don't do that. Another pitfall, not having a measurable baseline. Okay, which means that we want to do something, but we don't know if we do X amount of it, it's a good or a bad thing. Okay, but we're still measuring the difference. Okay. Instead, create a baseline and say we draw a line, and we don't know what the hell this thing is, but we're going to start here. Okay. For example, a company increased its app usage by 10%. Is it too much? Is it 10% of what? We don't even know, right? So say you work for a team and someone asks you, how's your usage? And you say, well, 10% up. So what's the number? Well, we don't know, but it's 10% up. So what's the point of setting that metric to your objective, right? So create a baseline by all means. Find that baseline if you don't have it, or ask around who has it, who has that data. Okay. Vanity metrics. That's in agility. Maybe the practitioner should know about that. Measuring what doesn't matter. Okay. Extremely pointless in doing this. Right? We're going to increase that by 10%, but it's not going to affect anyone. We're just going to, and we know that we're going to hit that goal because we always do, because no one cares about it. So don't do that. And instead measure what really matters. So give it a thought before you start your goal setting. And medium frequency, that we see it often enough to regard it as a pitfall, right? Lastly, denial. I've seen teams say, well, we're not so bad, are we? We haven't hit our goals, but maybe the initial number was wrong, so we've done well. But it's actually denial for failing to face the facts that was crap what you've done, and you should do better. Instead of trying to preach pragmatism and evaluation and pivoting, if you see that something doesn't work, stop doing it, and pivot or reassess your objective, or how you're going to measure your key results, as we said a moment ago with Imran. In fact, I've seen the first one when teams were ranking themselves, or say that, yes, we voted for 1, but we're not so bad. Maybe we're 3 out of 5, just rigging the results. Yes. Okay, there was a question there.
No, sorry, my elder one just came over, so sorry about that.
No worries. Real life example. I think is the last one for tonight. A company didn't know the true product adoption numbers. When asked about their product growth, they prided themselves that it was installed on 5 million devices. That's a lot. The app came pre-installed, regarded as bloatware, and was never used in reality. So you can guess how many companies are there. But these particular teams were product teams that were so separated from the teams that provided the metrics that they didn't even know how to measure things. So they said, yeah, we're installed everywhere, but no one uses us. So failing to face the results, that's the denial part of it. Okay. To wrap things up, OKR is simple to implement but hard to master, as a few things in this life. Right? Be pragmatic. Right? Don't overstress about it. You're going to fail if you're starting with OKRs. Everyone does, and we'll learn from our mistakes, and we get up and try something different. Measure what really matters. Okay, skip the vanity metrics and the crap metrics and the checklists. Use it complementary with your strategy, and if you don't have a strategy, have your strategy first. Spend a few days and weeks in doing this, and then bind your OKRs to your strategy. Always ensure that you have visibility and know your company strategy, right? Or your teams have that, because how many times have I come across teams that have no idea what the mission or the strategy is? And it might sound like corporate talk, but it is actually, but it matters because that gives the team the purpose to do what they do. Okay. And with that, I'll park it here and open to questions or comments.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any comments? Any feedback?
I have a question. You were talking about, thank you very much, by the way, really good. Companies, it taking a while to actually, don't expect to get it right first time. And companies, if they commit to OKRs, then I guess, would you normally expect that it might take them a year, maybe 2 years before they really see it starting to bring really good value? I mean, maybe it will bring value before then, but before they get good at it, if you like.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially if you start with the what we mentioned, the yearly cycle or the fire and forget, right? So that's 1 year wasted, more or less. Then someone might go to training, or you might get your coaches in, or you might have like a 3-month cycle, quarterly cycle, right? Well, you'll start to actually reviewing your objectives and your key results, and you start seeing things and patterns and start dropping what doesn't work and experimenting with. So yeah, I would say 2 years is a good amount of time to.
Yeah, and it sounds like the more frequently you review them, the more you can condense that, because you get the learning loop quicker. I wonder how many how many companies set off on this mission of OKRs and then abandon before they get to that point? I wonder, have you got any idea?
I would say about probably half of them.
Yeah.
So they end up in the fire and forget, and then no one does anything with it, predominantly because they don't believe in it. So it goes in the lower levels, if you like, at the team level. Teams don't believe in it because no one's assessing them, right? No one's asking any questions. We just fire and forget, park them somewhere. And companies, on the higher level, they don't know how to measure stuff, right? Or maybe they don't have a solid strategy, or maybe they're denying to accept the truth that maybe that strategy bit, someone put it there, maybe our CEO or our board put it there, but it's not really resonating with us. But we still have to do it, right? So it's a mixture of things. But yeah, and imagine we get a company of a few hundreds or 1,000 people, and they all need to align around a few objectives. Many things can go wrong.
There is a comment and a question in the chat. Value should always be linked to key results. How do we move our baseline KPI? Key results should be smart. I don't know.
Key results should be, yeah. Interlinked, I think. Key results should be small, measurable, right, and everything. The baseline KPI, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by move our baseline KPI, but as I mentioned, having a baseline is essential because otherwise you don't know what you're measuring. So if you want to start with OKRs as well, the objective is set our baseline. That's our objective. And the key result is to actually have, right, being able to measure that data. That's no shame in that.
So Andre, if you want to come off mute, if there are any further clarification points you want on your questions, but feel free to come off mute.
I don't know if you can hear me. No, there's no clarifications. It's just that the way we look at a lot, I guess to start to design OKRs, at least in my organization, is we, if you're looking to find something measurable, I mean, it's the same thing Achilles was saying about, establish a baseline, which is probably maybe an existing KPI that you have. It could be. And then the OKR would be how you would actually move, progress that current KPI. So, for example, working in an oil and gas company, if you have a lot of safety incidents, you'd probably want to say, okay, well, we have 50 of these a month. How can we start to? What sort of OKR would help us to actually, think about how we reduce our safety incidents? So it'll be from, maybe moving from 50 to 30 or whatever. I mean, it's just that. I mean, if you already have existing KPIs, I think they're good places to start in terms of, your key results and how those actually roll up into the objective that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, great insight, Andre. Thanks for that. Yes, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Never thought about that angle. Your KPI is your indicator, your baseline, and you see with your key result how you're going to move it, how you're going to change it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's also an opportunity to think whether you need to tear up your KPI as well, right? So I think it kind of works both ways. Do we need a new sort of baseline, and do we need to start again? I mean, it might be, for example, what Achilles said. Maybe this is a vanity metric, or it's not really a metric that's actually helping us to actually achieve our objectives. So it's a chance to either reuse or to tear it up, I would say, when you're designing new OKRs.
Great, thanks, Andre. There is another question in the chat by Rajni. What if a team member sees value in OKRs, but the leadership team is not convinced? So the classic case.
I think that everything begins and ends in leadership. So if you have all your teams believing in everything and your leadership, your leader, one-man team, right? Say that doesn't, then you're not getting anywhere. Because he's a central figure, right? Because he's going to have the final go on what we do and what we don't do. And again,
have you faced such a scenario?
Yeah, I'm actually exactly in that scenario. And I think I just mentioned in the breakout session with Achilles I see a lot of value in OKR from where I am. Of course, I'm a senior, technical person. And I've had this conversation. We have an agile coach who is supportive as well. But the leadership said they tried it, but they prefer having a well-shaped backlog. I don't know what that meant, but I'm still exploring OKRs, and I'm trying to apply the framework on at least when we are trying to create some of these backlogs. It is going to be just trying to make sure it's useful. We have vision and mission which I think we can relate to, but nothing beyond that.
I can take a stab at it. Backlog means that we want to have visibility on what you guys do, but we're reluctant to set any goals because, well, I don't know. I can take some guesses, but we might. But I would say that to Imran's question, that is super frequent. In Swift, for example, we have out of 8, 10 tribes or something, only one tribe lead has gone to OKR training. And when he came back, he was like, "Oh, now I understand why we do this." He actually said it, right?
Is it the fear of being measured, what we are delivering, or what do you think may be the reason why?
I think just too busy to do it. I mean, how, right? If you were a CEO, whatever, some senior dude in a company, we just goal setting, guys, come and do it. Right? How hard can it be?
I think they said, not many of us know how to create good OKRs. So that is one of the things I heard from the leadership team. So absolutely right in the sense that it's not an easy thing to do, and a lot of resistance, of course, for even bringing OKRs.
But it depends. I mean, the framework theory says that in order to benefit from it, you have your objectives, and you need to actually understand how you move the needle. That's all it is, right? Right. If you want to do this, it's going to take a few iterations to do it, especially when you have so many teams. Right? If you just want to set your goals, like we said in a sprint goal, when we said, okay, I want to release X, Y, Z, and then you don't, that's fine too. Right? It depends on how you want to treat it. If you want to benefit from it, you need to invest some time and training. So,
thank you.
There is a comment by Stephen. Stephen, you want to? Can't hear you, Stephen.
That's a great OKR experience.
Yeah, not so great. This has sort of made me realise I'm quite sane this session, because in my former employer, I just wanted to share this story. The founder had read a few books on OKRs and decided we're going to introduce them. Although, as you pointed out, Achilles, leadership level were going to have no OKRs, but the expectation was the team were to have them. I went on the training as the ambassador, as you put it, but the team didn't. They were very kind on me. They didn't push back. However, these were a group of really smart engineers, and they just couldn't figure out what they were meant to be doing and what a good OKR looked like. I was trying to help them and coach them through it, but we just couldn't figure it out. And it was actually demotivating on the team because they felt like they were lacking something, they couldn't get it. And I think now, so thank you, listening to this today has made me realise that actually the fact that there wasn't those at the leadership level was probably our problem. We had nothing to link back to. We were just sort of making things up for the sake of it, for no real purpose. So thank you.
Yeah. And, think about how nice is it, a leadership saying, we're going to do OKRs and these are OKRs. We sat down for 5 hours and came up with our objectives. Yeah. That's great, right? For any team, I think that, leading by example, this very thing.
Stephen, do you know how it ended up? Did it get abandoned, or did you leave before then?
We did do them, and again, one of the other things, we were expected to evaluate every month, which was fine. We used that, but then we were completely changing the objective and the key results every 3 months, so every quarter. So again, so many of the things that you said, be mindful of, we were doing it the wrong way, and the team were having to think so hard all the time to come up with new things. Whereas actually the stuff that we came up with the first time round wasn't too bad after we fell over and failed a few times. And if we'd just been left to focus on those for 6-12 months, we might have got a little bit more motivated by it rather than constant. It felt like a grind. It felt like we were doing something for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, indeed. Same here.
Stephen, can I ask a question of Stephen? Were you connected? Was the team connected with the end users? Was there something missing that if you didn't know how the end users used it and what they needed, then
yes, we were, because it was there was 3 parts to the product, and one of them was an operational system, and we were based in with the users, so we lived with them. Well, pre-COVID, we lived with them in the same building every day. So we were connected to them, but it was more around, we didn't know what the business wanted to achieve, so therefore we didn't know how to aim our objectives to achieve that. And we came up with stuff that we wanted to do in the end as a development team, rather than did it link back to what the business wanted to do.
And what about what the in-house users wanted? Were they getting what they wanted or needed?
They were from the product side, from my side, because I was talking to them relating to the product, but the development team, which I also looked after, they were more focused on their process and how they could improve their process with OKRs, which is the sort of the decision they made at the end, because they had nothing else to sort of aim at.
But couldn't they have ended at what the users wanted?
Yeah, we could. Yeah, we could have done. I suppose we could have done.
Yeah.
Hindsight is always 2020.
Are there any
We
other
can learn from
questions?
that for our next projects.
No, great insights and great questions, guys. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Any more?
So you've mentioned John Doerr's book. Are there, and that bits of it are okay, and are there any others that you would recommend to do or to steer clear of, perhaps?
Yeah, I mentioned the Felipe Castro's Spanish guy. If you Google him, Felipe Castro OKR, you'll find him. He's done extremely thorough research, and he has some downloadable goodies as well for free. And Jeff Gothel's written extensively on that, and HBR and LinkedIn and what have you. But Felipe Castro is published under Jeff Gothel's publishing house, so more or less the same.